everybody. Most times when you talk to people about how they got involved with corrections, it's generally a conversation where they say, well, I was only going to do it for a little while and then I was going to go into and it's something else. But then 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, they've retired, they've moved on in life, but they've had one heck of an experience. That's what happened with Jason Zaharis. After 27 years in corrections, both state and federal, he got involved with a company that was going to do religious programming for inmates. But when he went back inside the prison, he felt a different calling, and that calling was to serve the staff. I do want to give a warning that about 20 minutes into the podcast, Jason's going to discuss a night in which he attempted to take his life. So there is that conversation that's going to be involved. But Jason's also going to talk about the motivation of his experience and how he started his nonprofit program, Reformation 319, to support staff members who see all these terrible experiences and how they can go about seeking the help and the guidance they need to get through that and help process that. And he's also going to discuss his book, in which he wrote to help inform people, not only just the correctional officers, their family, but their friends on what a life in corrections is like. So let's get in this conversation. Please do us a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe, and let's talk to Jason. Thank you. We're back. We got Chris McConnell. How you doing, Chris?
How's everyone doing?
Good to see you again, sir. Jason, how are you tonight, sir?
Doing good. Jason Zaharis. I worked 25 years in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Prior to coming over to the federal system, I worked 2 years in state corrections out in the state of Oklahoma, where my cousin actually got me introduced to the world of corrections. It certainly was nothing that I pictured myself doing when I was in high school. It was one of those kind of things, I guess, a lot of people will say that, oh, I want to be a police officer, or oh, I want to be a detective, or I want to be a homicide, investigator or something. You hardly hear anybody saying, I want to go work in a prison. And I was one of those. I was one that always thought having family members, a brother and a cousin and a uncle that were all law enforcement, but on the street law enforcement, I always just pictured myself going along those same avenues. And a cousin of mine actually invited me to go inside the prison that he was working at the time, Dick Connor's correctional facility in Oklahoma. Went up there and was definitely enlightened. Had my eyes open to what prison was, completely opposite of what I expected. And then he kind of gave me that little intro of like, well, apply for it. What's the worst that can happen? If you don't like it, you quit. I started there and worked majority of my time, as I said, 25 years in the Federal Bureau of Prisons as an officer and a lieutenant. And towards the end of my career, it kind of started having a feeling and a for kind of a lack of better words, some push going on where I was starting to realize and think a lot more about everything that I had seen in my career and experienced, and started to kind of feel and think there has to be a bigger reason and a bigger purpose. Was at church on a Sunday here in Alabama, and the church that I was going to at the time was associated with a college, a biblical college, and they also would advertise, of course, for their traditional 4-year college that were for the younger students. But I, at the time, told my wife, I think I'm going to look into this evening program, and looked into it. Found it interesting, surprisingly, because as a child, I grew up in a home that was not religious whatsoever. My dad was a college professor, so he had his bachelor's degree in biology, his master's degree in microbiology, and his doctorate in zoology. So everything in his life was all science, which is surprising because my dad, growing up, grew up in a Catholic home, and he was a very devout Catholic. But around the age of 4, my family just quit going to church. So the majority of my childhood growing up, it was there is no God, there is no Jesus, there is no heaven or hell. Um, and I used to remember making fun of my friends and classmates. Why are you wasting your time on this stuff? It doesn't exist. Because
Right.
I was taught by my dad that everything could be answered by science. Um, so even when I got into corrections in Oklahoma, when I was at the age of 24 and started in corrections, 24 but looked 18. A great
Helpful.
mixture,
Yeah,
a
very
great
helpful, right?
yeah, a great mixture to have. Going into a medium security state facility, which not being religious and looking so young, it made for a great mixture of controversy and turmoil and strife and struggle for me. Um, and then when I got closer to my 30s, I started to realize, what am I missing in life? You know, you know,
Hmm.
Chris, you look so happy. Why do you seem so happy? Pete,
Mhm.
why are you and
Yeah.
I going through the same stuff, and yet you have a better result than I do? And so I started to think and look around and realize that the one big part that I was missing was having Christ in my life.
Okay.
So I decided that I was going to give my life to Christ. And that kind of started a little, that transformation. I think was like, these are the rules. These are the regulations. It's black and white. I got to come in tough and hard. I
Yeah.
can't come in soft. I got to, follow the rules, be rigorous. Um, and I also um, kind of adapted that mindset of the incarcerated were less than me. What was interesting that I quickly realized was the majority of the people that I was meeting in the Bureau of Prisons. I met at Chris at Butner
Mhm.
many years ago, but wardens were all um, tremendous wardens and incredibly knowledgeable, but they were also all Christian and held that faith and incorporated that into their jobs. Um, so when I just started realizing and noticing that like I said, most of the wardens, most of the exec staff, most of my supervisors um, that I was connecting with and bonding with, all had some amount of Christian faith in their life. When I would do something and it might be wrong, that when I got corrected, it wasn't in a harsh way. Whatever was done was always done in a way that it was like, okay, you realize you messed up. All right, here's where we got to correct these things. Here's where we need to get you straight. But it was all done in that Christian faith way. Fast forward, got up towards like I said, I got to the end of my career, ended up going through Highlands College and got my pastoral leadership certifications. Um, when I retired from the Bureau of Prisons, it was the same year that I graduated from Highlands College in 2021 in May, and in the end of September 2021, I retired from the Bureau of Prisons. So
Okay.
I realized that that feeling that I was having was I needed to get into some kind of like prison ministry, but I still fully wasn't aware of what I was going to be doing, but just I knew there was prison and ministry connected.
Hi, Jason. I'm glad we connected on LinkedIn, and I look forward to our conversation tonight. Thank you for your government service. 25 years is a long time. So you retired from the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and then you started, and you are the founder of a movement called Reformation 319, a certified nonprofit organization. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you want to change the culture on how staff and inmates view each other. Also, you want to provide information on how to take care of your personal health, your mental well being, and family by not separating their biblical or Christian lifestyle from work. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Jason?
So yeah, the idea of the organization, it started and came from me um, when I was going into the prisons and helping the chaplains and talking with the incarcerated about Angel Tree, that I started to look around and notice that there were a lot of organizations that help the incarcerated, and that's absolutely tremendous and wonderful that we have these various nonprofit organizations and for-profit companies and organizations, but there wasn't anything that was really out there for staff and for their families. Whole 27 years in corrections, I realized all the stuff, experienced a lot of the stuff that staff and their families go through. So the idea of Reformation 319 actually comes from 1 Peter 3:19, which is, after being made alive, he went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirits. I started to see that the faith part of the job gets neglected. We tend to teach our staff, two big things. First thing is, we tend to teach staff that you got to separate faith out of government work. And then the other part is, we kind of unofficially teach staff to suppress everything. If you're having issues, if you're going through problems, don't talk about it because you're weak. So just suppress it down further inside you. You know, if you're having problems at home, don't bring it into work, but also don't talk about it. If you're having problems at work, well, don't bring that home and don't talk about it. And then every year during annual refresher training, psychology usually was the one that would come up, and they would talk about all the facts and information about that correctional staff are number one in divorce, and number one in domestic violence, and number one in drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and all these horrible categories that we're number one in. We don't give an avenue for staff to find help. In the Bureau of Prisons, the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, and the majority of your state DOCs have a similar type of program available. But even that has a stigmatism to it, because a lot of staff feel that if you utilize that, it's either going to get back to their boss or supervisor, or they're going to be looked at differently. They might not get a promotion or what have you. So my idea with Reformation 319 is to get staff to, one, open up and talk, educate them on that you're not alone. There's a lot of us out there that have had these similar issues or similar problems, or we've been divorced. We might be a recovering alcoholic or what have you. Like, we've all been through different things, different problems, that we should be able to talk about it. And then part of what our organization is going to do is go to the facilities, talk with the staff, let them know about our organization, but then also connect them with local opportunities, local counselors, local organizations to their facility, to let them know, look, here are 3 counselors that are great for marriage. Here are some great places that can help you if you have a drug or alcohol problem. Here's a great place that can help you, with this concern or issue.
Chris talked about one time on a podcast about correctional staff will go through, where a normal person sees 8 to 9 events in their life, correctional officer will see 800 to 900 in their lifetime. We need to know when to appropriately deal with that. And there is a part where you have to deal with it. Yes, in the middle of the situation, in the emergency, we have to be responsive. We have to get past emotions, because we are there to save lives. Chris even says it. We're a firefighter, we're a paramedic, we're all these different positions when we're working as a correctional officer. But when the incident's over, that's when I always said they either need to see God or they need to see a psychologist, whichever direction they want to go in, but they do need to see somebody.
I agree with you completely, Pete, on that. We don't allow staff to seek help or get help after dealing with an emergency situation. My own personal experience was had just finished my first divorce, and 2 weeks after that divorce became finalized happened to be my wedding anniversary, and I was working as a lieutenant and on the rec yard got assaulted by three inmates. Um, uh, Bad situation, of course, for me, bad situation for other staff that were involved. Um, and, of course, it all got taken care of. But what was interesting was that happened to be told by my supervisors, well, if you need to go to the hospital, go ahead and drive yourself to the hospital.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was like, so I drove myself to the hospital after I just got beat down, kicked with, with steel-toed boots and everything, drove
Not
myself
in a
to the
good
hospital,
place.
got seen, got taken care of. But my mindset was, well, I need to get back to work as quickly as I can. So, I mean, I went back to work the very next day, hobbling around a little bit, but went back to work the very next day and
Yeah.
just moved on like it was nothing. Um, Not taking the time as I should have to have, allowed myself to heal,
Process through that.
yeah,
Yeah.
process all that trauma, but also just physically heal. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so that's where I definitely would agree that at times we drop the ball when it comes to dealing with staff on that. So that's what we want to do as an organization,
Gotcha.
is to let staff know, look, if you're having problems, reach out to us or reach out to somebody that you trust. If you
Mhm.
need a counselor, if you need some kind of professional help.
I noticed on your website, www.reformation319.org, it lists the National Drug Helpline, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Suicide and Crisis Helpline, Employee Assistance, National Domestic Violence Hotline. Is this some of the help you're referring to? Because you dedicated a lot of space on your website for these numbers. Is this some of the help you're referring to in the avenue?
Yes. Ultimately, I'm currently working on my bachelor's of science degree so I can get my Christian counseling degree.
Mhm.
Um, which my goal is to be able to utilize that so that when a staff member, either in person, when our organization will go and talk at facilities and educate staff and talk with staff, um, that I have the knowledge and a good solid knowledge of how to discuss that, how to talk with them, um, all connecting this to my Christian biblical worldview, um, to discuss that with them, but then um, to let them know that, look, all these organizations like that you see on our website, and then we usually will provide anywhere from like 3 to 5 local organizations or counselors, what have you, to get them something even more close to home.
And you're talking about that after the assault and everything took place. I think a lot of times that's where shift supervisors or people who are managing the facility at the time try to figure out how to allocate best the staff resources they have. It's better and safer for someone to take somebody who's been through a traumatic experience to the hospital, to home, or and do those types of things to support them. It's not to have that person alone by themselves thinking about the incident they just went through.
Definitely, that is very, very true. I think we forget to, talk to people and ask them
Mhm.
what is going on, what's the issue. I
Yeah.
know in my own case, right before I retired, probably about 3 years before I retired, um, I had gone through yet another divorce. I had a lot of issues with the divorce. I had a lot of work stress going on, just a lot of just personal marriage stress, everything going on in life, that I hit the lowest of low in my life and decided one evening, after coming home from work, after my captain had yelled at me and my associate warden had yelled at me for some stuff that took place at work, I got home, hit rock bottom, and decided, okay, I don't want to live anymore. And took 2 bottles of prescription pills and crushed it all up and poured it into a pitcher of Crystal Light. And I told God, somewhat in a comment, I guess, somewhat of a, not really a prayer, but kind of just a overall statement. I told God, if you want me, wake me up tomorrow morning. If not, life was great. And I sat there for about 30, 40 minutes and drank this whole pitcher of Crystal Light. Thank goodness. And God is an amazing individual. I woke up that next morning, not feeling the greatest, but I woke up. But I realized at that point, okay, you know what? I told you if you woke me up, I was yours.
If you're having any ideations of any kind of self-harm or any ideations like this being described here tonight, remember, dial 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Hotline, and you'll be able to speak to somebody. So please, if you're having any of those feelings, let's make sure that you reach out to somebody, talk to somebody. Doesn't matter who it is. Get with somebody, start getting the help that you need.
I tell everybody when I discuss this in my live conversations with people, when I go to the prisons and I'm talking with the staff, that's one of the first things I will quickly say right after I tell them about my horrible situation of trying to end my life. I will quickly tell them, one, never challenge God. More importantly, seek help. Don't do what I did. With all the years that I worked in corrections, and I think all of us have been through this, where you have been told, if you feel suicidal, reach out. If you feel suicidal, reach out. And I can even remember going, man, you have to be a weak person to go down that avenue. Well, sadly, I will say you aren't thinking correctly at that moment. You're not thinking at all at that moment. And I fell right in. I fell right down that avenue that a lot of other people have. But I would highly, highly recommend, yes, seek help.
That's a heavy story, and I know what inspires you now. Reformation 319 also provides information and help in regards to personal health, mental well-being, and family. And this is an area we talk about a lot on the podcast, and each one of us is passionate about awareness. So I want to talk about this for a second. Incarceration for inmates and correctional staff is a tough business. We all know that traumatic incidents leading to post-traumatic stress disorder are too high. Suicide rates are too high. Divorce rates are too high. Wellness programs, professional and spiritual help, medications, support groups, lifestyle changes, all can help. Jason, in your experience, what are you seeing that's taking shape in helping staff and inmates with these widely known but troubling statistics?
I think the first thing, and I've mentioned this a lot in our conversation, but I think the first thing is being honest and having open communication. Have that be with your spouse. Have that be with, if you're a single person, have that be with a family member or a close friend. You have to have open communication. And definitely my experience with being divorced twice, and now I finally found a godly woman, and one of the first things that both of us did when we first started dating was both of us told each other that we were going to be putting God first. Everything else was going to come after that. And then we stuck to that. And then when we got married, the other big part that we did was that we tell each other nothing is taboo to talk about. If I had, a lot of people have a feeling that, well, if I go home and I tell my spouse or I tell my loved one or I tell that friend or family member, if I tell them about what happened at work, that's going to scare them and freak them out. And I don't want to do that. Okay. That's going to be true. However, how you tell them can make a big difference. I mean, we tend as officers and staff, we tend to go into, like other, law enforcement and military people. We love to tell great stories with detail and add some gore into it if it took place, or be very descriptive. When we're talking to that family member, our spouse, our loved one, we don't have to go to that level. But telling them, well, you know what, I had a bad day. This is what happened, and it bothered me.
Mhm.
Something as simple as that what allows them to connect with us, and then they can they can see what is going on, where they might be the one that tells us, well, you know what, I have noticed over this last week that you came home and quit talking, or you came home and didn't want to talk to the kids. I noticed that you've been changing, and that could be that one person that guides you in that direction that you need.
I think the leadership that we have now in corrections is a generation that was used to being told to keep things in, to deal with things internally, and not to really voice too many things or be vocal about too many things. But they're supervising a generation now that's completely the opposite. They're used to having everything out in front of them. The generation now needs to consume the whys. They need to have buy-in. They need to feel as though they have something to do with the decision also.
Yes. I think over the probably I've been made more aware within this last year or two that the Bureau of Prisons and state DOCs are starting to make an effort for staff wellness. Have it be with giving guidance on eating healthier and getting some physical exercise, and seeking help when needed for the other things that we've been discussing. That is starting to become more of a natural thing.
Yeah.
I agree, though, with you, Pete, that there's that transition from an older generation of supervisors that have a mindset of, let's not talk about it, let's just kind of keep it hidden, and the newer supervisors that are, as you said, more willing and open to discuss things.
Jason, and I got a question for maybe some of our audience listen out there. Being that Reformation 319 is a certified nonprofit organization, what can someone do if they would like to make a donation?
The first thing I would recommend, um, if you are on the various social media platforms, if you do have a Facebook account or an Instagram account, we do have a page on both of those, Reformation 319. On the Facebook page, we regularly put out at least to three to more different posts a week. Everything from mental well-being encouragement to correctional pointers. Just like just recently here, we had a post that was, you need to be proud of your uniform and be proud of your appearance. And just reminding staff, that's the first thing the public sees. That's the first thing that the incarcerated see. That's the first thing that your boss sees, is your personal appearance and that uniform, especially out in public. The majority of the public, um, they regularly see, police officers and sheriffs, but they might not recognize that correctional uniform. We should be proud of our appearance. So we put reminders like that on our social media page. One of the things we have on the website is a donation button, that you can feel free to go through the website, and donate one time, monthly, whatever you feel like you want to do, any amount. We don't have anything that's, if you can only donate $1, that's awesome. If you happen to have a windfall of a tax return and you want to and you want to donate, we would take that too. We are able to accept donations, and they are tax exempt donations.
Many people talk about it, but you did it. You're also an author of a book called Reformation 319, The Life of a Correctional Officer. You want people to understand the life of a correction officer and everything that you have seen experienced, and dealt with, and that experience led you from being an atheist to believing in God. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So one of the things I definitely thought would never happen, and I mentioned way back in the beginning of our conversation, I never thought I would go into the correctional law enforcement field. Later on in life, never thought I'd get into ministry. And lastly, and most recently here, I decided I just wanted to get everything out in writing, what I had seen, what I had experienced, what I went through, to help open the eyes for other people. So I started out, this book basically goes from my childhood and what happened in my childhood, some of the trauma that took place in my childhood that shaped my life, to my time through working in corrections, and then up to the point of where we have a nonprofit organization, Reformation 319, and growing it into an organization. So it gives that whole spectrum of my life, but it gives kind of a three perspective view. And I mentioned this in my intro in the book, that if you work in corrections, a lot of the stuff that I discuss is probably not going to surprise you. It's not going to impress you. That was never my intent or goal. It was mainly to let people that already are in the correctional law enforcement field, to let them know that they're not alone. So that when they read it and they go, man, I went through that too. Oh, I thought I was the only one that had that happen to them. No, you're not alone. The second part was to let family and friends and people that know correctional officers or correctional staff, this gives them a little glimpse of why your friend or family member does what they do. For one example, why do most officers tend to sit, facing doors? So I mean, something simple like that everybody kind of knows, but like in here I talk about it. There's a reason why, of course we do that. And then the third part was, if you've never met a correctional officer, if the only part of corrections that you think exists is from television, the Orange is the New Black, or some of these quote reality correctional shows that have been on over the years, I tell people, put all that bias aside and read this, because this is coming from somebody who's been there, who's been through it, and this will give you a glimpse of what corrections really is. So it's kind of a threefold purpose for the person that works in corrections, their family members, and somebody who's never been inside a prison.
Jason, I want to say thank you, man. I want to say thank you for remaining engaged in the quality of life for correctional professionals and the incarcerated. I believe you and your wife can make a difference on how staff and inmates view each other. A cultural shift that is needed, but also takes time and patience. I so appreciate passionate people like you trying to make the corrections community better, even after your retirement. Stay focused, man. Stay at it and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much for what you're doing.